Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to do this session today and give you a little bit of insights about, a little bit the controversial topic of the interview. It's not about you, it's actually about the hiring manager. But before we go there, a little bit about myself. I have been at Google during 10 years. I first worked in sales, and back then actually what I had to do was more or less doing market education. Oh, somebody says they can't hear me. But is it getting better?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. So,
Okay.
and maybe you want to try to maybe log off and log on again, because I hear Monika just fine. Is anybody else having this issue?
The conversation is active.
Okay. Okay.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, I think it's okay. So maybe if you can't hear Monika, maybe just log off and then log back on to Zoom again. Maybe that will work. Okay.
Okay.
All good.
Okay. Okay. So just to start again then. So I used to work at Google for more than 10 years in different locations and traveled to many offices in Europe, in APAC, in America. And at the beginning, I was in Google sales. But when I actually joined Google, I had to do a lot of market education before I could do sales. So I had to convince business owners to go online and put their stores online in order to survive. And that was tough, but very interesting. After that role, I went into a role between product development and sales. So bridging the gap, making sure that salespeople, whatever they heard from their clients, actually gave back to product in order for Google to actually produce services and products that their clients really wanted. And on the other hand, making sure that whatever we produce, salespeople got informed and had the best insight to do it. And after that, I moved into L&D, learning and people development. And then 10 years into Google, I kind of thought, okay, it's time for me to jump. I nearly feel like inventory. So I set up my own people and culture consultancy. I worked a lot in the tech startup ecosystem here in Australia. I'm Sydney based. So I worked with a lot of startups. I worked with a lot of scales up technology companies and help them creating psychologically safe environments. But I also do a lot of coaching, leadership coaching and team coaching. And I do a lot of coaching, helping people like you landing a job at Google or at other FAANG companies. So today I want to talk about how you can impress the hiring manager at Google. Because as I said, it's actually the interview. Of course, you need to put your best foot forward. Of course, you need to be prepared. You need to tell your stories, but you also need to sell yourself. And one of the main buyers when you sell yourself is the hiring manager. So you need to put yourself into the shoes of the hiring manager. You need to figure out what does actually the hiring manager need or want? What are the kind of behaviors or attitudes that are important? Because you probably heard that saying, your most important job is to make your manager look good. That's for Google the same. So a hiring manager, when he or she does the interview, they will look out for people who help them looking good in the organization. So I'm going over now and share my screen. So just give me a second to do that. And just give me some cues if you can see my screen.
Yes, it's all good. We can see your screen.
Perfect, perfect. So what does it actually take to inspire and impress the hiring manager? Well, first of all, if you made it beyond the recruiter screen at Google, you're in the official interviewing process. And I really want to congratulate you on that, because that's already a big achievement in itself. You made it from thousands of people who constantly and daily apply to Google into the process, into the hiring process. So again, this is a big achievement. However, what is really important here is, and I have it here on the screen, your role-related knowledge gets you into the interview. Nailing the structured questions gets you the job. And the structured questions are behavioral questions, hypothetical questions, or situational questions, whatever you want to call it. Once you are in the interview process, Google already trusts and has a strong incline that you can fulfill the basic job requirements. Otherwise, you wouldn't make it into the job interview. And that's one of the main reasons that Google conducts normally only one role-related interviews compared to 3 behavioral or structured interviews in its interview process. Of course, if you go for a technical role, expertise is assessed quite extensively, but even then on a general level. But expert level expertise is more important than specialized knowledge at any level. So you know it, typical behavioral questions would be, tell me about a time you had a positive impact on your team, or tell me about a time when you had a difficult situation at work or had to deal with a difficult colleague, manager, stakeholder, you name it. Or then the hypothetical or situational questions could be, what would you do if your client reduces suddenly the budget by 50%? Or what would you do if you made a minor mistake? Nobody noticed it. And of course, there are the general cognitive ability questions. But today, we are not here to figure out how to best answer these types of questions. Today, we are looking at how we can address the hiring manager's need. So, how does the hiring manager think at Google? Again, you probably heard the saying, as I said at the beginning, your job is to make the hiring manager look good. That is exactly what the hiring manager is doing when they are assessing you in the interview. Will this person make me look good? Or in other more tangible words, will this person help me achieve my and my team goals? As you can see, supporting your hiring manager is being successful takes more than role-related knowledge. It takes a unique mindset, certain behaviors, and some very distinguished attitudes. And now you're asking yourself, well, but how will I know what kind of behaviors and attitudes the hiring manager is looking for? So I have put together some key principles Google hiring managers look for. So I go through them one by one. The first of them is willingness to learn. Are you willing to learn, to constantly learn? And are you curious? How do you keep yourself up to date with your knowledge? And equally important, how do you actually apply the knowledge that you learned? A second element is having some intellectual humility. It is very hard to learn if you can't admit or are not willing to admit that you have shortcomings or that you might have made a mistake. Are you able to take other people's expertise, advice, and guidance? Are you taking that on? Another element for Google hiring managers is having conscientiousness. So, do you have the mindset of an employee, or do you have the mindset of an owner? Are you constantly looking at areas to improve, to make products better, processes, relationships, etc.? So the constant betterment, the constant improvement of things is hugely important. Another critical element they're looking for is, do you have a strong passion? And here is like, a lot of people want to join Google just for the sake of joining Google, just to say it, I work at Google, to have it on their CV. So are you one of those people who just want to join Google, or do you actually really have a strong passion for what you're doing? Do you care deeply about what you're doing for work? And are you being personally invested and motivated by what you're doing? So passion, hugely important. Another element that Google hiring managers are looking for is, what do you actually add to the culture? And during my 10 years at Google, I can honestly say that I could go into any office in APAC, in Europe, in America. It always felt the same. The atmosphere, so to speak, or the culture always was the same. And what I mean by that is how the people interact and behave with each other, how they approach challenges, how they work on projects is exactly the same. So in a way, no matter where you are, in which office, you will feel at home. So, and of course, the Google hiring manager now is looking at, well, will you fit this kind of culture, but also what will you add to the culture? Because that's important as well. What is unique about you that will actually change and enrich the current culture of the organization? So it's not just about a cultural fit, but it's also about a cultural add. And then the last thing, and I would say probably one of the most important one, is adaptability. How do you navigate constant change? And again, I can tell you from my own 10 years experience, if something is true at Google, is that change is a constant. Everything is constantly moving. So you need to be able to adapt in a work environment where things are not fixed. So how quickly can you change your mindset from maybe initially being a little bit frustrated of big changes to being positive about it? How can you embrace the unknown? Do you see problems or do you see challenges? Do you have a can-do attitude? And importantly, are you able to perform on a really high level, on high standards, even when you might have limited information? So these are key principles at Google. And of course, teamwork is another element, but I didn't want to add that because that's very important for every organization you're going in. But the willingness to learn, to have curiosity, being conscientious, truly care about the work you're doing is very important for every role in the organization. So this was the easy part of today's session. Now let's have a look at the context, the environment your role is in. And this is how you will impress the hiring manager. There are 2 steps you can take to analyze the context of the role you are going for or the role you will be conducting. So first is a macro level. And this is in a way as simple as it gets. do a SWOT analysis, not just of the organization of Google, but actually of the function you're going into. Really do here your research. What are the challenges and opportunities of the functions you're going in? So for example, you're going into Google Cloud, then do the research. Do the research and find out what are the strengths of Google Cloud? What are the weaknesses? What are the current opportunities for Google Cloud? And what are the threats? I cannot stress enough how important that is. You need to know this context. A good starting point to actually get and find this information is, for example, going and read the Alphabet annual report. A big chunk for the annual report is all about Google. So read the sections that are important to your role and skim through the headlines for the rest. But don't go blind into your interview. And you can do this for any role at Google. So you go into Google Ad Sales. Well, again, what are the strengths of Google advertisement offerings? And what are the weaknesses? What are the current opportunities? And what are the threats? You do that for ad sales, marketing, YouTube. If you're a product manager, it doesn't matter for engineering. Look at the function you're going in and then do this analysis. Sharing this knowledge and your personal perspective.
Okay,
Sorry, is that a question?
No, sorry. I think somebody was just on mute. It's okay. Please go on. Sorry.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so sharing this knowledge or your personal perspective. So here, be confident and think about yourself, your own experience, and go confidently in it, and say also not just what is written, but what actually you think are the strengths and weaknesses. Say what you think Google could do better or the function could do better. So they want to hear not just what is written about it, but also what your opinions are. Sharing this knowledge and, as I said, your personal perspectives will truly impress your hiring manager. And how do you share it? Well, in the interview process, you will always have, as I said earlier on, some hypothetical or situational questions in which you might be able to sprinkle this knowledge into it. And of course, there are the general cognitive abilities. So imagine you're being asked a question like, a potential healthcare client is torn between AWS and Google Cloud. How would you influence the client to use Google Cloud? Of course, having a SWOT analysis about Google Cloud is hugely beneficial here to do that. Or a question could be, that could be a GCA question, or it could be a role-related question. What will be required to launch a product, Pixel, or whatever it is, whichever product it is, in market X? Again, having these insights about your function is hugely important. A typical GCA question used to be, how would you enhance product X? How would you enhance YouTube? How would you enhance Android? How would you enhance Google Maps? Again, having a good understanding of the products and the functions will help you giving better answers here. Now that we looked on a more macro level, I want to go now on to the level of the hiring manager. So,
Monika, I'm just gonna stop you for one question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, I'm happy to answer some questions.
Okay, we've got one that asks, in Google, team match happens after you pass all the interview rounds. How do we know which team we will be a part before the team match, and how do we share this research knowledge in front of hiring manager?
That's I really like that question. Yes, and there are a lot of interviews done where we do team match. And there I agree that will be a little bit more challenging. However, your team match will not be outside of your expertise. So if you are being hired into Google Cloud, you might not necessarily know in which team in Google Cloud you're going in, but it's going to be Google Cloud. They're not going to put you into AdSense selling. So it will always be within a function that has strong similarity. So that's one thing. Even in the matching, you have that opportunity. Once you are being matched with a hiring manager, ask who that hiring manager is, and we come after that to that. So, but ask as many questions as you can beforehand. If you are being team matched, ask what kind of teams are right now looking for positions, or what kind of teams I might be matched. So your recruiter will be able to give you some answers here. And the other way, what you asked is, how can you use those information with the hiring manager? So one way of doing is, if you have a GCA question that is role related, that's the best opportunity. So the general cognitive ability questions, where they give you a big, hairy challenge problem, and you need to come up with a solution. And as you probably know, the solution itself is not important. What is important is your thought process, your decision-making process. So you need to verbalize your decisions, your thought process. You need to verbalize your knowledge and your understanding. So, and the more knowledge you have and the more research you have done, the easier it is to make actually founded decisions that are founded and grounded in some facts you know about the organization or the function. So GCA question, always good to have that. I understand sometimes you get questions that are not role related. But even then, trust me, having understanding of how Google or the organization works might be very beneficial to actually solve or have a very intellectual conversation with the hiring manager. Then another area of sharing this knowledge is with situational or hypothetical questions. So, as I said earlier on, imagine a client within Google Cloud is considering moving to another competitor. So here actually understanding, well, what are actually Google Cloud's strengths or opportunities that could come up as well is really, really beneficial. Or being asked, how would you enhance the YouTube? So right now, what are the main competitors of YouTube? You don't need to know all the details of the competitors, but you need to know, well, what are the main competitors? I would probably say right now, it's one of them is TikTok. So how could you enhance Google YouTube to match or to do something different than TikTok is doing? So this is how you can actually share that knowledge. And then also addressing not only strengths, but also weakness. And if you address weakness, then what they want to hear is, well, if you understand the weakness, do you have some ideas how to actually improve and change it? So that's how you can share it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. I think it answers the question. Okay, let's go on with the workshop, and then we can take more questions later on. Thank you so much.
Okay. No worries. Okay, so now that you did this SWOT analysis, now let's go really, really into the hiring manager. So here is finding out who is the hiring manager. Again, ask the recruiter, ask for a name. Who is the hiring manager if you can? If you are being team matched, ask potentially who could be the hiring manager. You can always ask these kind of questions. And then what I want you to do is you do your online research. Who is that person? What is their background? For example, what kind of education have they? In which organizations have they worked before Google? What is their career path? So really understand where they are coming from, what drives them. What I mean by that, what drives them. If you see the kind of education, the kind of work, the kind of positions they have done, you will have a good understanding what drives them. Then the next thing is, what is their role at Google and where do they fit in within the organization? So are they a senior manager? Are they a middle manager? Where do they fit in? And what are their important relationships? So for example, if you're going into product manager, you know a product manager relationships for you and for your hiring manager are sales, or engineering, or marketing, or PR, etc. So these are all the relationships. And then ask yourself, well, what are actually their challenges then? So again, when I said to you earlier on, do the SWOT analysis for the function, now I want to do it very precisely for the manager and the role the manager is in. And then ask yourself, how does my role fit into this? And what kind of behaviors and attitudes do I need to bring in order to help my manager to overcome these challenges? So, for example, if your manager has a background in finance, but is now leading Google Cloud, you can be quite sure, and I know I'm doing here a little bit black and white, but if there is a strong financial background, you can be sure that this person probably is more asking you more analytical questions than soft skill questions. Yeah. So do that. I'm not saying they only will ask you that because of that, but there might be a tendency of having more analytical questions rather than soft skills questions. If your manager needs to set up an entire new team, they are looking for somebody more than likely who is very adaptable, who is a self-starter, who doesn't need to be micromanaged, who takes some calculated risks, who is willing to learn fast and fail fast. If your manager leads a team that has been there for a very long time and needs to follow certain processes and procedures, of course, they want somebody who is very detail orientated, for example, and they will ask you in questions like that. But they might also want somebody who can bring in a breath of fresh air and challenge the status quo. So these are the kind of questions I want you to ask when you think about the hiring manager. If a hiring manager has had a lot of changes in organizations, maybe they have been in Microsoft, in Facebook, and now are at Google, These are people who often think on a high level. They like to have challenges. They like to work on new problems and solve problems. So they might then also ask you questions in this regard. And I just heard a ping. If there are other questions, I'm more than happy to answer questions.
We do have one question here. It says, can you please explain how the behavioral and situational questions should be answered and any frameworks for reference?
So the behavioral questions, you probably have heard of the STAR methodology. So that's the situation, the task, the actions, and the results. So the situation here is you need to give the hiring manager a good understanding what your role was and the complexity of the situation you have been in. The complexity of the situation is important, especially when your level isn't clear yet. If you could go on a level 5 or 6 or 7. So the complexer the situation, in this way, the better to go up for a higher position. So, but give the hiring manager or anybody, not just the hiring manager, a really good understanding of the situation and your role and your position. Don't assume that the hiring manager knows. Don't assume that any other interviewer who asks you questions knows. Just because they have the CV in front of you doesn't mean they know. So don't make assumptions. So be very clear. Then the task is, what were you tasked to do? Or what did you put yourself up to do, to improve, to change, to solve a problem, etc. And then the next thing is, you need to list the actions you took. And here you don't need to list every single action, but you need to list the main behaviors you have done or actions you took. And because these are behavioral questions, you really need to dive into the behavior. So a lot of people focus way too much on the story and not so much about the behavior. So if the question is, tell me about a time when you motivated a group to finish a project that was behind schedule. So I'm not so much interested about the project that you did and led. That doesn't really interest me. What interests me is how you motivated them. And don't just say, I set up a meeting, we discussed it, I made sure everybody is motivated and engaged. That's not answering the question. We need to know exactly what you did in order to keep the people motivated, engaged, and working on a high level. So give those actions, be clear that you answer the behaviors in those actions, and then you give the result. What was the result? So that's the normal STAR methodology. What I want you to do next, though, however, is add to that a learning or a key takeaway. What did you learn from that situation? And the learning is, so if something, if you made a mistake or a failure, it's all about what do you do that it doesn't happen again in the future? Or the flip side is, if something happened and you achieved something really well, can you actually replicate it? Do you know what it takes, or was that luck? So the key takeaway or the key learning is for you to be actually very reflective on those stories you're telling. So use the STAR and then add a key takeaway or a learning. And then, so that's for the behavioral questions. And then for the situational questions, so what would you do? Here, of course, you can't follow the STAR methodology. There are two ways of answering that. First of all, you give an answer on hypothetical, what you actually would do. So what are the steps you're doing and what are the actions you do to measure success. So Google is always about collecting data. So how can you ensure that what you're doing is actually successful? So explain that, explain in a hypothetical way. Again, it could be hypothetical. How do you motivate people? So then give the reason, tell what motivates people and how do you implement that? And then how do you actually test that you were successful? Another way of doing it is give an example. So you can say, well, it's good that you asked me that. I have an example that I can share with you. However, if you do give an example, you need to go back and give an overview how it's done on a hypothetical level. Because again, Google wants to know, are you reflective? Do you actually know what it takes to do and achieve certain things? I hope I answered the question here. Otherwise, please just ask me more.
Yeah, if you don't think just Monika has answered what you're after, please just continue asking in the chat box, and then Monika can have a look after.
Yes, thanks.
So,
okay. I think we can continue on. Yes, let's keep going.
Okay. So, what I want you to really take away from here is put yourself into the shoes of your hiring manager. What does she or he need from you? How will you help him or her to be successful? How will you help the team to achieve their goals? And based on that, they will ask questions. It's about achieving goals. It's about, and goals can be anything. It can be better relationships. It would be a sales goal, whatever it is. But put yourself into the shoes of the hiring manager and anticipate questions that could come up. And go through the list that I just shared with you. So one thing is to impress the hiring manager, and another thing then is also to inspire a hiring manager. And here I want to give you some tips how to do that. Express yourself in order to inspire. There are two questions you will always be asked in the Google interview process. One is, please tell me about yourself. And the other question is, why do you want this role? One or the other question will come up. When you're being asked, tell me about yourself, please tell about yourself. Don't just repeat what's on the resume. It's your opportunity to really let the hiring manager know what you want them to know about yourself. And also, if you have done your research and know what the hiring manager looks for, and you bring that skill and you bring that behavior, add it in there. But again, do not repeat what's on the resume. At the same time, do not assume that they know what you have done. They have flicked through the resume. But what I'm saying is, once you have finished the interview, they will still have your resume in front of them. So add something that will be very memorable. Add something that will make you stand out. And this can sometimes be anecdotes. That can be anecdotes of why you went into engineering. This can be an anecdote of the first time you used Google Maps or whatever it is. If you can touch into or tap into the emotional response of your hiring manager, you can be sure you will be memorable and you will stand out. If you can put a smile on your hiring manager, is that question, he or she will remember you. If you can make him like go, oh, wow, that's interesting. She will remember you. So try to emotionally, try to touch into their emotions, and that will make you stand out. Don't just say your achievements. Say what makes you thrive. Say what makes you motivate. Then the next question, be very precise why you want the role. Here again, you need to stand out. Don't just say, well, Google is an amazing company. I heard so many good things about it, and the culture is just amazing. 10 out of 10 people say that. You will not stand out. Why is it that you want this role? Is it because you want to have impact? What kind of an impact do you want? If the culture is really important to you, what about the Google culture and that role stands out to you? So be very, very precise. And also, I don't want you just to praise Google, what an amazing company it is. No, this is also the time where you can sell yourself again. Say that you have what it takes to be successful in that role. And another thing is, let them know that you, if this is the case, that you want to, that you see yourself being in Google and have a career there, that you see yourself moving up the ladder, that you see yourself having impact over the long term. So sell yourself, tell exactly why you want the role, and show interest in moving on and learning. Another thing is ask really thoughtful questions. Don't ask questions of what does a normal day look like in this role? That's not a thoughtful question. Be interesting, show your curiosity. Maybe you want to connect it to the challenge the hiring manager has. But really be, again, stand out. Don't ask a question that 10 out of 10 candidates ask. The last two things is, I want you to be confident. You know what it takes. You have the expertise, but also be humble. You know as well that wherever you are right now, you probably had people who supported you, who guided you, who coached you. Don't shy away of letting the hiring manager know that. Don't shy away of tell that you took on advice, that you took on feedback. Feedback is so important at Google. So be humble and at the same time be confident. But above all, be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. Sooner or later, you will be caught up. So just be yourself. Be your confident, smiley self when you go into a Google interview. And before I open up to question, even more questions, or Gabby, do you want to do that at the end? Or do you want to do questions now?
Yeah, we can do it at the end. If you have something else, we can wrap it up before we take some more questions.
I just wanted to share, I will be more than happy to work with all of you guys to help you nail your interview and save some money. So I put together 2 offers for people who attend this webinar. So one is really nailing what I just talked with you in details in a 60-minute session, very targeted to understand your precise situation and the hiring manager and what kind of questions to anticipate. And I offer this session 10% cheaper than a normal 60-minute coaching session. And the other offer I have is doing the same thing for a 90-minute session, but then also really practice some interview questions that we anticipated the hiring manager will ask you. And here is the same thing. I will offer here this for 15% off than a normal 90-minute session is with me. Okay, now let's go to some questions.
Awesome. We're just going to take one question and then we're going to move over to our community platform and Monika can answer more. So I've put the link of our community platform in the chat box. So we're just going to take one more and then afterwards, if you guys want to ask more, please feel free to join our community and ask your questions there. So I think this is from somebody who was asking you the behavioral and situational question, just a follow-up question. He asked, when asked, how did you measure success? And if you have not been in a data-driven environment, how would you answer a question like this?
Oh, really good. Really, really, really good. I like that. Let me have to think about that. So data doesn't have to be just hard facts, doesn't have to be just hard numbers. So measure success could also be feedback you received from a colleague, from a client, from a customer, from your manager. It could be feedback in form of a maybe employee engagement survey. That could be numbers, but it could also be qualitative feedback. So so if you haven't had something put in place, really think about it. How do you actually know that you were successful? And I am sure you come up with some ideas that you know. Maybe the client increased the budget by a certain amount after a campaign that you implemented. That is a good indication whatever you have done was successful. Otherwise, the client wouldn't do that. Or maybe you are a people manager and there are actually now and again people knocking on your door and actually want to do work for you or want to do a project with you. That is feedback that you are doing something really good in your position. So you might need to be a little bit creative, but I don't mean that in any way that it's not real. Just really think about whatever you do, we always have some way of data point that tells us if you've been successful or not. And if by all means you cannot come up with anything, what do you believe? What does your gut feeling say? Were you successful or not? That is always a good data point as well.